Good morning, everybody. My name is Kyle Houchins. I'm a tech and a trainer for McNeil. I also run a small consultancy called the Outside Digital Art and Design. Um, and this is Getting Started Rhino for Mac. Um, if you haven't joined one of these before, if you haven't seen one of these videos before, we try to do this a little bit differently than your typical software demo, so to speak. The idea behind this is that I try to do a sketch, either the day before or the morning of, usually the morning of, um, and something that I haven't modeled before. And then I put myself in a position that you are all in, which is somebody walks into your office, drops a sketch on your desk, and says, build this now. and there's a certain amount of pressure and a certain amount of stress that gets put on you and the tools and all that kind of stuff that I find is a fairly realistic simulation of kind of what happens in a typical design thing. And I've been designer for a long time, built thousands and thousands of models, and have been through this process a bunch of times. And so the goal of this is for me to try to dump as much knowledge onto you for how that process works and what to do and how to avoid what I like to refer to as clean sheet syndrome, when you're sitting in front of Rhino and you're looking at all these buttons and you're looking at a blank page and somebody drops a sketch on you and says, go for it, and maybe you're new to Rhino, maybe you haven't used it very much, and the beads of sweat start collecting on your brow and you start saying, holy smokes, how am I gonna do this? So the whole idea is not only getting started with Rhino, right? We try to pick projects that are pretty attainable and pretty simple from a form point of view, but also, like, how do you think about this stuff? Like, how do you analyze how to even get going, or what tools to use, right? Rhino's got hundreds and thousands of tools in it, and which ones do you use and what circumstances do you use them in and all that kind of stuff. So um, the other aspect about these that makes it different than a typical software demo, so to speak, is if I run into problems, which I very likely will. If you've seen these before, you've said, yeah, there's lots of problems in these videos along the way. Um, we're going to stop. I'm going to explain what happened once I figure it out myself, and we're going to talk about how to fix it, right? Because it's not realistic to say in Julia Child's fashion that I click a few buttons and poof, this amazing model shows up, right? There's work behind that. And as part of that work, there's also roadblocks and there's dead ends and there's stuff that just, frankly breaks and things like that. So if that happens, we're going to stop, talk about it, try and figure out a way out of it, and then I'm going to share my thought process with that whole scenario. And I find that the longer that I do these videos, that tends to be the aspect of these that people react to positively more than anything else, is the, oh, that happens to me all the time and I couldn't figure out how to do it and you just showed me how to unbreak it, right? So that's kind of the goal, is to not only talk about Rhino and show how to build things, but show how to unbreak stuff if you run into the very real situation that you go down a path that leads you to a less than optimal result of what you were looking for. So um, the other aspect of this is these are intended to be interactive. So we did a sound check before. I had everybody kind of check and see where the chat was. Please find the chat. Please use the chat. Don't feel bad about interrupting or whatever. It's part of the plan here. And if you see something that you don't understand, or I didn't explain it correctly, or it just plain doesn't make sense, let me know. Hit the chat, let me know, and I'll back up and we'll talk about it, and I'll see if I can explain it in a different way. So with that out of the way, we're recording. In the chat, I already dropped a link for our Vimeo page and our YouTube page. That's where this is going to be posted afterwards. So if you have to take off early, don't feel bad. You can always catch up with the recording later. The other thing is, this is not intended to be a class, so don't try and follow along, because I'm going to move pretty quick because we've got about an hour and a half, and I'm going to try and pull off a fairly comprehensive slightly ambitious build today, so I may move pretty quickly, and I don't expect you to try and keep up with me at this point. So so with that all out of the way, let's get started. The way that I start this with is just about the same way I start almost every model, which is a sketch. And I typically build in the front view. I don't know, it's just a habit, but I'm going to start with the picture frame, with the picture command. Actually, it used to be picture frame, but it sounds picture command. And I've got this scruffy little sketch I did this morning of this skateboard, and it's going to take just a second to load. There we go. And BMW did this skateboard a couple years ago called the Street Carver, and I thought it was pretty cool. And this is a kind of an homage to that, a little bit of a redesign. I added some of my own touches to it, but I like their truck system. They had this kind of cool looking modern truck system. So this is my interpretation of ground where they've already walked. So if this looks a little bit familiar, something that you may have seen before, yeah, that's what I was looking at when I designed this. So good artists copy, great artists steal, right? Isn't that what Picasso said? And then Steve Jobs stole it later, which is the ironic part of that. But anyway, so we have an image placed in the field, and we're going to talk a little bit about like what this thing is and what it does. So basically, we've got a flat surface that has a little bit of form on both ends, right? So it's generally speaking a fairly, a flat shape, and we can imagine that the edges of this are just going to be some curves, and then we're either going to loft it or trim it or sweep it or do something. But this is not a terribly difficult thing to start with as far as the board is concerned. The wheels are essentially just going to be revolved forms. Or the tires, I guess. The wheels themselves are going to be a little bit of modeling here. The trucks, I'm going to show you how to do a fading transition inside this thing here. The main block of this is essentially just, almost a solids modeling kind of process. And then this truss, again, pretty basic, pretty solid model-y kind of, draw some shapes and trim some shapes and that kind of stuff. So the other thing about this is it's not only symmetric side to side, but it's symmetric front to back. So we'll probably build 1/4 of this thing. We'll build half the truck, one arm and one wheel and tire, and then just go boop, 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 and get the rest of it. So I'm hoping that's where the delay and kind of some of the complexity and some of the fidgety bits down here that are going to take a little bit longer, I'm hoping that we capture some of that speed back later when we can just go boop, 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 and get the other 4 pieces of it that we need. So with that out of the way, let's go ahead and get started. So I take this image, and the very first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to drop it on a layer. I'm going to change this name to the name of this layer to image. And then I'm going to move the objects to this layer so that they're there. And the cool thing about that is now I can turn on the visibility. I can lock and unlock them. But the problem is this image is right smack dab in the center of my modeling window. So if I were to start modeling at the origin, you can see, especially in shaded mode, the model is bisecting my image, and especially in shaded mode, I can't see what's going on here. So I almost always take this image and slide it back out of the modeling window so that it's back in space. In front view, it appears correctly, but in perspective view, it looks like I've moved it the wrong way. So let's put it this way. Let's see. Yeah, that's where I want to put it. Stick it back here, and then that way when I go to front view, my model is in front of the image, which is what I wanted in the first place, and when I go to perspective view, it's behind it. So that's where I wanted it to be. And then the other thing that I want to do is I want to drop the contrast of this image just a little bit, because if I were to try and draw over it, because the default color of the lines are black, you can see my line disappears, right? So that's not super useful. So I'm going to pick this image. I'm going to go to the materials panel here, and you can see that the board image is already highlighted. And I'm just going to come down here to transparency once it stops thinking, and pull up the transparency a little bit so that the object fades, the image fades out a little bit. And then that way I can still see it, but I can still work over it. And you can see that my line reappears because I can see what's going on. So I'm going to go back to my layers. I'm going to lock this image now, and then that way I can work over it and it doesn't get in my way. So let's start with the board. I think that's probably a good way to get going. And I haven't really placed this image over the origin, so I may do that. So because this is just a sketch, I'm going to try and figure out roughly where the center of this thing is. So let's unlock this. And I can see that the center, because I click on the line, the gumball goes to the bounding box center of the object. If I pick this, I can slide this over and I can get it on the origin, or at least close to the origin. We're dealing with the land of ish here when we're dealing with sketches, so I'm not super crazy about, or I'm not going to go super crazy about trying to place that, but let's go ahead and lock that now. I can delete this line, and I can drink some coffee so my voice doesn't fall apart on me. And we can start actually digging into this and trying to figure out what this does. Now, I'm imagining that this is kind of almost a modified oval from the top view. I don't have a top view of this thing, so I have to kind of find the way along the way. But let's start simple, and let's just draw a straight line. Right, so we've established the overall size of this thing. Now let's change degree, and let's change from degree 1, which only has 2 points, to degree 3, which will have 4 points now. And these 4 points will allow me to start manipulating this thing, right? And if I go to my perspective view, if I take these 2 points and I start pulling them out, I can start to get some shape here. But this isn't going to be nearly enough shape to do what I want. So I'm actually going to change the degree of this thing from degree 3 to like degree, I don't know, 7. And that'll give me a bunch more points that I can play with, right? But it'll still allow me to do a single span surface when I do this. And if you don't understand what I'm talking about, don't worry about it. It's not necessarily important for, your first day of Rhino class. So I'm going to drag this point up here so that it's directly in line. And if you notice, my gumball is respecting my O snaps. And the way that it's doing that is in the gumball properties. There's a snappy dragging, and my bunny tail is actually white, and my background's white, so it's hard to see. But if you click on the bunny tail, there's an option in here for snappy dragging or smooth dragging. If you set this to snappy dragging, gumball will respect your O snaps as you're dragging, which I find to be super useful. So let's go ahead and drag this one down here as well. I'm going to snap that to that end. And what that does, because these 2 points are in line, that means that they are set up for an axial tangency, right? I can flip across the center line and make a symmetrical object and know that they're going to be symmetrical side to side. So this is an important alignment to set up first. This is an important alignment to set up first. And now we can start playing with shapes, right? So I can start pulling back here, and I can start pulling back here. And I may design this thing and then decide which end I want to use and then flip it and get rid of one end versus the other. But let's mirror this right now just to see what it looks like, so we can get a feel as to what our shape is starting to do. And we're starting to see that kind of pull up. So let's go to our drawing and start matching that. And I don't want to mess with this first point right here, because that is my tangency point, and so that one kind of needs to stay put. So I'm going to slide this down here. Maybe I'll pull this one down as well. And the goal is to make as much shape with as few points as possible, right? So I'm happy with this part of the curve. So I'm actually going to get rid of this one. I'm going to mirror this again. And then I may actually come in the front view and make a cutter All right, line from midpoint, start at 0. And I'm just going to trim off this back here. Oops. Nope. Trim, trim, give it to me. Trim, 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 trim. No, just one trim. That's all we need. All right, so we're going to cut that. And then I'm going to mirror this around the center point, which we just did. And we've got our curve, except I don't like this alignment side to side. So I'm going to match the curves from one to the other. And I'm going to average them. And I'm going to make them tangent. And that gives me a nice tangent match right there. I'm going to do the same thing over here. And then I've got my basic shape, right? So now I have to figure out, like, how am I going to make this thing, right? How am I going to get this shape? And there's a couple of ways I could do this. The cross section through the center of this thing is almost dead flat, and I can take advantage of that if I snap from endpoint to endpoint. And then I'm in a position now where I can sweep. Let's get rid of this. I'll probably need it again, and I'll be like, why did I get rid of that? I can sweep using these two rails, right? Or I can sweep and do, you know, something on the end here. But let's start with the simplest solution, right? I always try to go to the simplest thing, and let's do sweep two rails, and we're going to just sweep from here using that. And let's just see what we get. And it did kind of what we expected, but it didn't give us the shape that we wanted. And I may just go ahead and roll with that. The other thing that I could do is I could actually just loft this side to side, because it just gives me the exact same thing. And loft might give us a little better result. And you can see the difference between sweep and loft. So when I swept it, look what happens. See how complicated that surface is? And this is not terrible. Like, don't jump off a bridge if your surfaces look like this, by all means. But if you can make surfaces that look like this, which only have one isoparam, this is called a single span surface. That's kind of our goal, right? That's kind of what we're looking for. And the cool thing about this is, because this is a single span surface, that means that the points on the surface are really well organized and really nice and really easy to get to, which makes this, say it with me, class, easy to edit. And if I pick it in the right direction, if I pick this point and this point, cell V, it picks all of the points in the V direction, and I'm going to deselect these down here. Then I'm going to relocate my gumball to here, and then watch this. I was able to just build that shape. Super simple, super easy, super clean, right? That's kind of what we're looking for. So we like that, except for I pulled these bottom points too low. So let's grab those again. And let's just snap those back up to the center, because we want that straight, right? So now we've got our nice kind of flowing form. So let's mirror that. I'm always fighting in these videos to, like, not get too designer nerdy. It's a temptation to really noodle this stuff. So I'm going to use the match surf command, and I'm going to average these. And what that's going to do is that's going to set my tangency. We don't need to go curvature. Let's just go tangency. Tangency from side to side, so that we get a nice match going through there. Okay. So now we've got a really nice, really simple, really clean shape. Just grab them and join them. right? So they're joined into an open poly surface. And then we want a little thickness in here. So we're just going to grab the extrude dot. We're going to add a little thickness. Ta-da, board. Maybe that's a little thick. This is, of course, some sort of crazy space polymer, something or other that's whisper thin and super strong. That looks better. All right, so that's the basis of our board right there. And that's what we're going to use to build off of. Any questions so far? This all look pretty familiar? All right, so let's jump into the meat of this thing, which is the suspension. And I'm going to actually save this because that's what you should do, because faith may save your soul, but only Control S will save your data. If you are inclined to roll that way. All right, so the next thing we want to do, what do we want to do? Let's try, let's jump into the wheels so that we can kind of establish the perimeter of this thing and what it's going to look like. So this wheel is kind of a chunky gumball kind of thing, and I think I'm actually going to use a sphere for this and just kind of pull out the basic form of this thing. And then I think I'm going to do some point editing on this thing, or maybe not. Maybe we'll just let it roll. Yeah, actually, I'm not in love with that as a sphere. I don't know how you guys feel about it, but I think that's too not good. So let's change the degree on this thing, because spheres, as they're written as a default, are degree 2. So let's make it degree 3, and we want this to be deformable, and say done. And what this is going to do is this is going to allow us to edit this thing and make it, you know, and do it in a smooth fashion. If we didn't make this deformable, it wouldn't be as good. So what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to grab both of these rows of CVs and I'm going to scale them to 0, and it gives us a shape like that. And then I'm going to grab both of these and scale this to 0. It gives us a shape like that, which is much more skateboardy, wheelie kind of thing, which what I was looking for, right? So that's kind of more what I was looking for, but it doesn't quite, it doesn't quite meet the, the wheel thing. So let's split by isocurve, which is the right click on the split tool, and I'm going to just pull. Let's go to the front view so I can see. And actually, it looks like that sphere is not really spherical. See that? See how it's got a little dent there? I think that's from the change degree, and we can fix it, but I think I'm not going to mess with it. I think I'm going to back up. See how these points are not lined up? That is why we're getting a weird shape. So I think I'm going to back away from this. I don't think I want to use this as an idea. Let's get away. Let's kill this. So let's look and do, let's design our shape in this view using the image, which is something that I do fairly often. So we're going to start from the center of this thing, right? And I'm going to come out, and then I'm going to add a corner. And then I'm going to come up, and I'm going to add another corner. I'm just using this kind of as a guide, right? And then I'm going to come out here, and this has a little separation in it. So I'm going to draw that separation in. By the way, that we only use 3 points for a corner, right? So 1, 2, 3. And then let's try and match the shape of this one. 2, 3. And then this has a kind of a dish to it. So I'm going to place 1 point here and then pull that dish out. And then we've got a corner, 2, 3. And we've got a flat, 1, 2, 3. We've got a little divot, little separation here, 2, 3, 1, 2, 3. And then we've got the actual wheel itself. Has a little flat on it, and then it starts to arc over. And I'm going to only do half of this thing like that. All right, so that's basically going to be our wheel profile. So let's spin this thing, and I'm going to rotate it 90. So I use that image just as a guide, and then I'm going to rotate this. It'll let me pick the right part of the gumball thingy. There we go. Like that, and I'm going to spin it in this direction. Full circle. And that gives us our wheel with everything kind of built into it. So I'm going to mirror this, and then we're going to match surf from one to the other. And we're going to get tangency, we're going to average, and it should be good. And I think we should be in pretty good shape because I pretty much built the curves in pretty good shape. So let's join it. And then I can scale it to adjust the width or whatever I want. But I think that's about kind of level of chunkiness that I was looking for. So let's drag this and place it in space with the top view. What kind of stance do we want on this thing? Kind of want it really stretched out like that. And then let's compare it to what we had before, which is okay. It's about what we were looking for. Maybe it's a little big. Maybe not. Maybe bigger is better. Who knows? And it looks like maybe I need to push it a little bit this way. So we've got a basic 5-spoke wheel that's stuck in this thing. So I'm going to go ahead and just do that with a trim curve. And I'm going to start here. And I'm going to draw my shape. And I'm only going to draw half of it because I'm going to mirror it from here to here. And it doesn't matter if it's not lined up because we can just use match. I'm not going to join it, but I am going to average. And I'm going to repeat the match up here. And then join it up. Let's go to shaded view and just see what we get. Go to the top view and make sure that this is like outside. If it's behind it, I won't be able to see it. So let's go to front view. Let's shade it, see what we've got. So I'm okay with most of that. I think I'm going to scale it down a little bit because I want it to fit within the wheel itself. And then I think I'm going to pull it kind of more like that. And then I don't like that top shape, so let's adjust it. And I'm going to do that by pulling this guy a little bit, pulling this guy a little bit. And I've screwed up my match here, so I'm going to explode this and then match again. There we go. So, and I still am not in love with that. So let's look at, again, this is where I start like over designing, but let's make it so that it's not terrible, shall we? I'm going to go to wireframe. Let's pull this up, something like that. And let's match again. It's getting better, but I just really kind of want this to follow. And I may, you know what? I think I may abandon that. Let's just do a circle because I'm taking the long way, but what I really want is for this curve to follow exactly there. So let's do this and trim it. There's no reason to fight with it. Trim that. And then I'm going to do a blend curve in here from this guy to this guy. That's really out of joint. Let's see. I don't like that. Let's use the adjustable blend curve. That's what we want. It's not liking this little hook on the end, so I'm just going to hack it off. Make my life a little easier. Build a gap, fill a gap. There we go. There we go, that's better. Using the shift command, or the shift key to drag those to be correct, and I'm going to trim and join. So that's better. I like that better. And then let's do a symmetrical mirror on that. So I'm going to go from here to here. I'm going to pull all the way through there and then trim. Here. And that's a lot better. So let's go with that. I'm going to join it up. I'm going to move it around a little bit just to get it where I want. And then I have to think about this a little bit. So if I just blow a hole through this thing, I have to keep in mind that when I put a fillet on it, that the opening is actually going to be a little bit bigger, right? Because the fillet is going to cut back into the surface a little bit like that, right? So I have to plan for that. And in this case, I think, let's go to shaded mode. I think I'm getting a little close to the edge here. Maybe not, maybe that'll work. But if this is my hole, once I put a fillet on it, this is actually going to be the outside of the fillet. So I have to think about that in early and make sure that I have enough room for that to happen. And I think in this case I do. So I'm going to go ahead and take this and array it. And we're going to array it 5 times, typical 5-spoker. And then we're going to take this, go to perspective view, and you can see that these are like all crazy out in space like this. I'm just going to click and scale these to 0 to flatten them out. Right, that's a lot more manageable. And then I'm going to just use the extrude dot. I'm going to just rip them right through the center of this thing. Cap. And then I'm going to just do a Boolean subtract. Difference, sorry, Boolean difference. And now I've got my wheels. So I usually keep my curves. If I'm doing a client job, I always keep my curves, but for demos, I usually dump them just because it's faster to delete them. But let's blend some edges here. And I'm going to just do all of these at the same time. And we're going to just use a very small value. And I'm going to use the set all. And let's do like, I have no idea how big this thing is, but that's still huge. So set all. Still big, so I'm going to drag the handle to get about what I want. 0.024. I'm going to use 0.025 because it's a round number. And then let's preview it to see what it looks like. make sure that it's going to work, and it doesn't. So let's do set all because that was too big. So let's do 0.01. And we can just sneak up on it until it works. There we go. Looks like it got everything. So I'm going to accept that. The preview function is really useful. It saves you a lot of like iteration and back and forth and trying to figure out like, well, why didn't that work? Okay, so that's our wheel. It's got a little detail in the middle of it, so let's go ahead and add that. And I'm going to just do that with a line. And I'm going to place it, I want to start it between two places. So the start of the polyline, I'm going to type between. And the first point is going to be here, and the second point is going to be here. So now I know that that's placed right at the bottom. And then I'm going to aim this towards the center, and that way I know it's lined up correctly. And then I'm going to split it with a point to get the length I want. And then I'm going to take this and project it onto this object. And I should have a curve now projected onto the surface, which I can then take and apply a pipe to. And I'll use the round caps option. And that's my little detail. And it's recessed in the drawing, so let's go ahead and do that. And we can just use the same settings we did last time. Do a Boolean difference. And there's our little recesses. And we could add a little blend on that, but I'm not going to do that for this because I think we've got the idea now. So that's our wheel. So if we go to the top view, I can mirror around 0, and I can go this way. And I can go, oh, let's do them both at the same time. Whoop, settle down. There we go. So that's kind of the layout, right? And that's our stance, and I kind of like how that feels. Let's do the basic block, and if we look at basically how this thing is, if we analyze this, it's essentially just a surface on the side with a cutout on it that's fairly extruded with a couple of cuts through it. So let's not overcomplicate that. Let's just go ahead and draw it up. And I'm going to overdraw it for my own sake. Actually, let's do it with a curve. Like that. And then I'm going to overdraw this thing and then use the board to trim it back. So let's just draw this way up here like this. And we'll go to wireframe so I can see what I'm doing. Actually, I'm going to hide this for now. And we'll start back here. Like that. And then the drawing actually shows a little positive and then a negative, so it's kind of an S-shaped curve. So let's add that. And I'm not even going to worry about like trying to set my tangencies because I'm going to do that with match later. So let's pull this like that. And I'm gonna build that transition in, but let's use match and get this set first. And I'm not going to average these because I want to just force that one. And so then if I turn my points on, I know that this point I have to leave alone because that's my tangent point, but I can edit the rest of this stuff. So let's make this a little less terrible looking. It's always the goal, right? Trying to do a little, take products that are out there and make them a little less terrible. All right, something like that. Again, I don't want to fuss things too badly, but I'm going to trim these with each other. That gives me that, and then I'm going to do an adjustable blend curve between these two. And actually, I'm pretty happy with the way that looks, so I'm going to trim and join. And I know I've got a nice tangent match through there. Trim these. And then I can actually just make a planar surf out of this, which I think is probably going to do what I need to do for now, and we can always mess with it later if we don't want to. Self-intersecting, yes, fine. You don't like my curves. All right, so let's place this. Let's bring our board back, and let's place this in shaded view. And I can see right now I've got a problem in the fact that this is way too low. So I'm actually going to untrim, because this is a planar surface, it's a four-sided surface that's been trimmed. So let's untrim it, but I'm going to keep my trim objects. And that allows me to kind of see where that surface is. And I can see right now that it needs to extend. So I'm going to extend the surface. And I'm going to just pull it up so that I can see how much farther it needs to go. Come on now. There we go. There we go. So I'm going to blast it right through there, and so I can see where that thing needs to go. And I'm actually going to move the entire thing just a little bit forward so that it actually intersects, because you can see where it's blowing out through right there. So let's grab this and this, and let's just move them forward just a little bit so it intersects completely. Like that. We're going to cheat the drawing just a little bit. And then what I'm going to do is explode this curve, and I need to redraw it just a little bit because it's not doing, it's essentially not doing what I wanted it to do, which is to be, you know, this was needed to be tangent to the board. So let's use this to trim. That's why modeling is good and drawing is a lie. You can lie, cheat, and steal terribly with drawings, but that's why I always use Rhino. I use drawing as a way to get started, and I use Rhino as a method to design. And people are like, well, you need to have it completely, completely designed before you actually start working in Rhino. And I disagree with that, because as you get faster in Rhino, you don't need to spend as much time drawing, because you'll be able to actually make your design decisions in Rhino, right? Because we're not trying to build CAD people, right? There's plenty of CAD people out there. We don't want that. We want designers using Rhino as a medium, like clay and paint and paper and brushes and whatever, right? As a design tool. So that's why I'm trying to do these things, so I can show you how fast you can go and how you can realize a design instead of just having somebody hand you stuff and be like, give it to the CAD person. You know, we don't want to be the CAD person. We want to be the designer that does fully realized designs in Rhino. Stop it. All right, so I think I've got a secondary curve going on here, and that's not what I want. I don't want this, so let's get rid of that. You saw that match was like matching the wrong thing. It's because the curves were right on top of each other in this view. So let's average those. We're going to be tangent, and that feels a lot better. Now we can use these curves to except for this one, not you, to trim this, and we've got our shape that we wanted, and it lines up with the board and actually has kind of a cool swoop to it that I didn't expect. Unintended awesomeness. All right, now does that give us enough room for our suspension? Maybe not. Maybe I need to move this in a little bit. farther like that. And then I probably want it to have a little bit of dynamicness to it. Maybe not. Maybe I'll leave it flat. So let's mirror around 0. And then I'm going to just use that as a guide to extrude to. Like that. And I'm going to delete it. All right. So that gives us our basic block. And now we need to do the cutout in the front. So let's go to the top view and isolate. I'm going to use a center point square from here. And I'm going to just draw that out. And then I'm going to use Wirecut. If you haven't used Wirecut before, it's kind of a cool tool. It's like if you've ever made a styrofoam model and you used a hot wire, that's basically what this does. And it just hacks through. And it does essentially a Boolean operation with a curve. But the cool thing is you get this inside surface, right? You get this stuff in here for free. Whereas if you just trimmed it, you'd have to build that. So we've got that. And then we need to take out our little chunk for where our suspension is going to be. So I'm going to do that with a cylinder. And let's go to Wireframe so we can see where it needs to be. So let's put it about here. And let's do 2 inches just to have something to work with. And that's too far, so I'm going to bring it back like that. Mirror around 0. And let's do a difference. So that's our part. Okay, we'll knock the edges off just a little bit. Actually, we'll do the whole thing except for that bottom part. So let's blend the edges. Let's grab everything except this and this and this. And we don't need the tops. So I'm going to get rid of the tops. I don't need that one or that one. Let's preview it. And it looks like those are too big because it's breaking apart on us. So let's set all. And it still looks like it's breaking apart. So it looks like we need to dig into this a little bit. So let's do them one at a time and see what's the dealio. So chances are the problem is up here in this corner, right? This is usually the problem. So let's do blend edge again, and we're gonna. I thought I was going to be able to get away with being lazy, but I don't think that's the case. So let's do 0.15, and let's do all of the big radiuses first. And we're going to work from big to small. Let's see if those work. Looks like there's a little edge in here I missed. Let's see if that'll work. No. All right, that's still. We're going to have to do this even. We're going to have to do this even slower. So let's start with this one. That one worked. So let's do this one. Make sure we get all the way out. It looks like it does not like that edge. So I'll show you a trick on how to get away with that stuff. And I think what's happening is I think this is the problem right here, this little surface. I think that's what the problem is. So let's back up a second. And let's see where that little surface came from. The little surface came from this seam. So if I do this, and I rotate this guy a little bit so the seam is out of the way, then when I do my Boolean, Now I don't have that little surface, and I think this will work better. So let's give it a shot and see. See how it gets the whole edge now? See how both of those work now. So fillets and blends cannot stand little tiny edges on stuff. They just don't like it at all. So what you can do is if you start seeing that kind of stuff, then you can say, okay, well, where's it coming from and what do I have to do about it? And then you have to start digging into like where are all these little bits and pieces coming from. So now I have a complete edge, right, that goes through here, but I used this value of 0.02. If I use 0.02 again, the blend is absolutely going to fail because you can't do a blend on top of a blend at the same value. So I have to drop this. I have to start big to small. So I'm going to do 0.015, drop that value, and then I'm going to chain the edge. And let's see if I get lucky and I can just do the entire thing. Let's see if it'll work. And in this case, it's failing, and it looks like it's failing right here in this corner. So it got everything. This is ugly. So see how it's piling up here. So 0.015 is still too big. So let's do set all and just do 2.01 and see. And that it liked. Made it all the way through there. So let's go ahead and roll with that. And then let's do the same thing at the same value. And since it's symmetrical, it should work. And that's our piece. All right. So, whoops. That's weird. Drop that out. Now, I could sit and say, well, gee, why did that do that? But I don't have time for that nonsense. So I'm just going to do a line from midpoint at 0. I'm going to go to the top view. Let's figure out which side it is. It's that side. And I'm just going to hack that off. Because the one side worked and the other side didn't. So, all right, see ya, bad cop. We don't have time for you. Now we're close poly surface. People get nuts over that, and they're like, I get tech support calls all the time. Well, my fillet worked on one side, but it didn't work on the other. Is the part symmetrical? Yes. Long pause. Just cut the bad part off and get rid of it. I don't care why it failed. I just need to get my model done. All right, so we've got our block. We can flip this to the other side. And let's build our little suspension arm thing here. And if we look at the suspension arm, it's basically a rectangular shape. It's got a little roundy thing on the end, and then it's got a little roundy thing here with a couple of little blendy bits. So let's go ahead and try and lay that out. And the easiest way to do that is just to start with our center lines, right? I want it to go from about here, and I want it to end up somewhere kind of right there. So knowing that, I can hide everything else and then start to work on this thing. And I'm going to lay this out using a circle down here. So I can't think of a better way to do it right this minute. And let's do a big circle down here, which is kind of what this thing is going to look like. And then let's just start doing a little drafting. Kind of like that. And then we're going to use a smaller circle in the center of this thing. And then we're going to do, oops, another line like that. And another line up here. Now, these might not end up being the actual lines that we use, but this will be a decent guide where we can start actually building this thing. So the back of this has kind of this spherical shape. And I think what I'm going to do is I'm actually going to just build that with a sphere and just hack the back off, because that seems like the easiest way to do it, right? And we kind of want to start easy and be easy, and we want all that, to be great. So I'm going to make this big. And then I'm going to go to the top view, and I'm going to kind of try and figure out like how big this needs to be in order to get that right. And so I'm going to lay out where my edges of this thing are. So it needs to be like kind of like that big. So then I have to kind of look at the sphere and say, well, what part of that sphere is going to fit that segment? And if I use a midpoint, I can kind of go from here to here. This is ish, right? This is design modeling. This is not, you know, we're not going to production here. We're trying to get something on the page so that we can show people our idea. So that's kind of what we're looking for right there. So I'm going to cap that guy. And then this, I may just do this with this whole thing. I might do with a square with a rounded edge on it. Let's see what that looks like. Let's do a square, but let's do it 3-point with rounded edges. So let's start like there, and there, and let's pull it out this way. I missed it by a little bit, but that's all right. Let's round that. I missed it by a lot, so let's try again. That's better. That feels a little better. Let's relocate the gumball to the center of that circle. All right, so I'm going to go to the center here, and then I'm going to use gumball to drag to the center of that thing. So I know that it's concentric, which is kind of what I wanted, right? And then let's rotate it a little bit so that it lines up a little better. So that feels about right, but I am going to explode it because I don't want a round edge on this side. Delete that and that. And I may extend these curves. Past where they need to be, so I've got enough to play with. And then let's do the same thing to get our center point, or our little lines in the center to do our blending. And I'm going to set the gumball to the center of this, and then I'm going to copy paste, and then I'm going to shift drag to scale, and that will give us our internal lines, right? And then I can put a third circle in there, which kind of gives us our center point. So that's kind of what we're looking at, right? So our blend is going to kind of start here. It's going to go, this detail is going to fade in, and then this thing is going to go out past the end. So I think what I'm going to do is I'm going to just make this solid for now, and it doesn't really matter because this end is going to get clipped off. Let's make a surface out of that. And then let's extrude it a little bit, like that. And let's bring everything back and see where we are. So this needs to go in here, like that. And obviously hate this transition, so we're going to have to do something about that. So let's actually do this. Let's put that right inside that, because that's about kind of what we were looking for. And then I kind of wanted this to have a little transition on the end of it. And so I think I'm going to extend, Shift Command click to sub-object select, and I'm going to drag this in here all the way like that. and then we'll start putting these two together. So I want this to have a little bit of a shape from the top. So I'm going to actually start in here like this. Do something like that. I'm going to wire cut it. And it gives me my basic shape. Let's blend off some of these edges. And I'm going to do a variable blend on this. So I want it to be much more rounder at the front than I do at the back. So I want this one to be much bigger, like that. Maybe even bigger than that. Something like that. And then I want it to be much smaller at the back, but a little bigger. Kind of like that. So that works. Do the same thing down here. The preview, by the way, will turn red. The little preview icon will turn red if Rhino knows in advance that the thing is going to fail. So if you do something and Rhino's like, you sure you want to do that? That preview will turn red so that you can actually see that you're making something that's going to be terrible. So let's go to the front view. I'm going to draw a circle from the center of this thing to get my trim, and let's see, if I pull this, I just want to see what that ends up looking like, and I think that's going to work well. So I'm going to split by isocurve. I'm going to split this surface here and here because I don't want to trim the entire thing. I just want to trim this. In fact, I'll do a Boolean split because that's will give me all the bits I need. All right, so we can Boolean these two together. And then if we wanted to, we could blend out the edges and stuff like that. But I think I'm going to move along. So we're at 10 o'clock right now, and I want to make sure that we finish. So if I go to the front view, let's go to wireframe. And then let's look at our transitions. So we want to make this little detail here, right? So this thing and this. And there's a formula for doing this stuff. You need an inside curve, an outside curve, and then you need to, build yourself a little place for that to happen. So the first thing I'm going to do is I'm going to cap the back of this off, and I'm going to do that like that. I'm going to close this off so that it's actually closed. And join these. And this is the formula for this kind of stuff all over the place. So anytime you want to do a transition like this, this is the formula that you're going to use. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to copy this, and I'm going to paste it, and I'm going to set the gumball to be at the center of this, and then I'm going to scale it. And this is going to be the inside of my transition, right? Something like that. And I'm going to explode this. And I'm going to extend these curves. Past there, past there. Trim them all so that they're lined up. You can tell, like, when I'm really thinking hard, I can't. My speech pauses. I'm like, and brain can't process. All right, so I'm going to extract this surface and just show these curves. Bear with me, we're almost there. And then I'm going to use split, and I'm going to split this surface using all of these curves. And what that's going to do is that's going to give me this piece and this piece. This piece gets deleted because that's our gap. That's where we're actually going to build the transition. That's where the fillet is going to fit. And then what we're going to do is let's turn on the points for this surface and see what it looks like. And in this case, it's just a degree 1 surface, you can see, because it was planar. So we have to change its degree. And let's make it 3 and 3. So now we've got some points to play with. We just grab these points and we pull it in. And you can see what happens is it pulls away from this down here, which is not what we want. So let's do this instead. Let's turn on the points. And instead of pulling the points, let's go to the top view and let's bend the points. And I'm going to bend these points, and I'm going to start from here, and I'm going to go out here, and I'm going to just bend the end of this thing. And let's see if it pulled away. And in that case, it did as well, because we don't have enough points to work with. So let's rebuild this. And instead of being 4 and 4, let's do like 6 and 6 and say rebuild. And then let's also shrink the trim surface so that the points fit inside of the boundaries of this. See what happened there? So the points are now inside the boundary, which means if I leave these points and these points alone, it's going to stay tangent, which means I can mess with these points. I can bend them. And now it doesn't break apart. If I join these back up, it should join. And it did. And then I can put this back together with a simple blend surface. And I'm going to just pull that down a little bit. It doesn't need to be curvature. Curvature is overkill for product design. That's my opinion, and no one's going to change my mind. All right, so there's our fading transition surface. Cool? You like that? Show it in rendered view because it's more impressive in rendered view. Oh. Cool? All right, let's knock these edges off. This is going to start going fast. We're doing a lot of fiddling right now, and then it's going to start going faster. So, because we're going to grab the power of copying things from one side to the other. So let's try a bigger fillet, see what it looks like. Too big. Still too big. When your part disappears like that, it's too big. All right, fine. Let's see how big you'll let me do it. There we go. So that's what you get. All right, so that looks pretty cool. And we could put some kind of fastener or something like that in there. I think that would be cool. But I think for the time being, I think I'm going to just roll with it. So we're going to mirror this around 0. And then we're going to mirror this. Well, actually, there was one more detail I was going to put on the back of this thing, but I think I'm going to skip it. Never mind. Shh, forget that. Forget I said that. trying to make this go for an hour instead of like an hour and a half. But that's basically our layout. So basically, all we have to do is clean up these transitions here. I'm going to do that with a simple Boolean. I'm going to remove from this using this. My mouse is wearing out. Oops. We got a surface on top of two surfaces on top of each other. You see what happened there? I tried to pick that. This was the original surface we made, and then when I extruded it, it actually made the extrusion was a copy. So I've got an extra surface hanging out there that I'm going to get rid of. So let's do that again. Take from this, using this. Don't want to delete the objects. My right mouse button on my mouse is starting to die. Don't delete. There we go. So that looks better. And I could do the Boolean again, but mirror is so much faster. And I am going to Boolean these two together so that they are one piece. So there's that. And now we just have to make that little truss object underneath, right? And then we could do fasteners and things like that if we wanted to do later. But let's go ahead and do this little truss, which is kind of a cool little detail. And I'm going to just do that with, I'm just going to do that with a curve. Start inside here so I've got some room to play with. I'm going to mirror the curve because it's symmetrical. And match. Match seems like a tedious thing, but it's really important to make sure that your stuff is accurate. So I'm gonna, here, let's play some gumball tricks. I'm gonna actually just extrude this up to make a surface, like that. And then I'm gonna pull this out. I love gumball magic tricks. And then I'm gonna add a little thickness to this, like maybe a little extra thickness, like that. And then I'm going to bring this up and I'm going to tap Option for a copy. And it seems like that's not a good idea, but I'm going to roll this 180. And then I'm going to bring it down. And because this is an extrusion, check this out. Shift Command click, I can drag this and make it much longer. And then I can decide like how this thing intersects by scaling, something like that. And I can actually pull this through. And see how I don't like how that shape is working with the board, but I'm going to just use the board to make the shape that I want. So I'm going to subtract from this using this. Now I have the shape that I wanted. And then I'm going to subtract again. Right mouse button, I think, is about perished. I get about a year out of a mouse and then it's done. So there's my top and my bottoms, right? Like that. So now I just have to make my little transition surfaces. And I'm going to just do that with a cube. This, I'm going to overdraw it, make them like 1/4 of an inch. Draw that. Here. Now that I've got these set up the way that I want, I can mirror again. That's too far away. Just kind of hacking the elements, hacking the elements in and then cleaning them up later. And that's not really following my design very well. So let's go back and let's follow it a little more closely. Just using mirror because I'm lazy and I don't feel like copying them. You're like, wow, that is lazy. I like to call it efficiency. You can call it whatever you want. So let's see, we're across the center line. So let's take these guys. Go like that. Take one look at them, more look at them, and see if that design looks right. I think I'm gonna mess with the spacing a little more. That feels a little better. And I may want this one to be solid. Like I don't want the space behind it. So I'm just gonna Shift Command click, and then I'm gonna just gumball drag it and make it bigger. That feels better. Let's do the same thing down here. Isolate is the command that I'm using to hide everything. Shift Command click drag. And then let's grab all these pieces. And let's do some cleanup. So I'm going to just hack these off. And let's see, I want this edge to be down. Shift Command drag on the edge, and then I'm just going to pull it so that it's down in there. Let's just do that. That's easy. I'm just going to pull these so that they're in the right spot. Shift Command drag, and then I'm going to just stick them in there like that. Shift Command drag the edge. The nice thing about degree 1 objects is you can play with the corners like this, these extrusions, and mess with them, and it doesn't make a mess. If these were degree 3 objects, then you start getting a lot of distortion and a lot of like isoparametric screw ups, so to speak, and it's hard to sort through them. But this is called sub-object selection and sub-object editing, and it's a super useful thing, especially when you're working with really basic objects. And this is just going to save me a bunch of trimming and stuff. And it's like, we can argue over whether this is more or less efficient, but the thing that it does give me is it gives me the opportunity to decide, like, if I wanted to add some like thick thin or something like that to some of these things, I could do that right here. I wouldn't have to do it at a later date. So say, for instance, if I decided I wanted this edge to be a little bit fatter, see, I can do that. And actually, I kind of like that. So let's play with it a little bit more. Bring these two together using scale. Maybe we did some testing on this thing and found that our struts needed to be bigger, so we made them bigger. So now I'm going to just Boolean this whole thing together. And then we've got a bit of a mess in the back of here, which is fine because I'm just going to hack this off anyways. In fact, I want to make some shape out of this thing. So I'm actually going to do something like this. And then that way we can hide this little hack that we had. See, it wasn't a mistake. That was the way it was designed. Mirror. And then let's bring everything back and see what it looks like. And then the design shows like a little bolt, some bolts and stuff through here. So let me show you my favorite trick for, let's make the bolt holes first, but then I'll show you my trick for fasteners. So I'm going to make a hole right there, and I'm going to blast that all the way through. We're almost done. If you're getting foot tappy to get to the end here, we're probably 5 minutes from the end. So let's grab both of these, and we're going to Boolean subtract with this. We are going to delete the input. And that is our through hole for that. And then let's do, I'm just going to fake it for the other one. All right, so my favorite trick for fasteners is actually not in Rhino. if we go to McMaster-Carr, if you're outside the U.S., this is a website, a U.S.-based website that is they make fasteners and all sorts of hardware. And the coolest thing about this site is if I go to screws and bolts, let's go to socket head screws. Let's go to, we want them to be metric. And let's say we want like, I don't know, let's do like M10s. And we want them to be 190 millimeters long. That's our part. If you go down here, there's a little link on every single part on this website called product detail. And it brings up the product detail for this thing. If you scroll down, check this out. There's a little drawing, and up here, there is a thing, 3D step. Save. We just downloaded it. Now we go File, Import in Rhino. We go to our downloads. We find our cap screw, and we bring it in. And these things come in just about perfectly. No. Nope, should have scaled it. Let's try that again. Downloads. I always do that wrong. Import. I am going to scale it this time. There we go. And that is a M10 190 millimeter bolt, which is way too big for what we're trying to do here. But it's cool nonetheless because it is dead accurate. So if you actually had scaled this thing correctly, which I should have done in the first place but didn't, you can actually use mechanically correct fasteners. And the other cool thing is, because these things are mechanically correct and the design on these things is correct, and the threads and the pitch and everything on them is exactly like it would be for the part, what you can do is actually use this stuff to make threads and parts. So say, for instance, if we came through here and the way that this thing was assembled was it didn't have this hole. Let's see. We want to well, I thought there was a remove hole. There isn't. All right, never mind. So let's make threads out of this thing. So I'm going to explode. Nope, I'm going to extract this. And then I'm going to untrim this and untrim this. And so I've got my bolt, which is way too long, but let's pretend it's not. And let's say I wanted this part over here to be threaded. All I have to do is take this thing and do a Boolean subtract or a Boolean difference with this, using this. Come on, mouse. Don't delete the input. And check this out. There's your threads. Never model threads again. And if you print this, and as long as your scales are correct and you didn't mess with the bolt when you just brought it in and used it, these threads, if you just run the correct size tap through it, will clean up perfectly, and you'll be able to screw it in by hand. So people are always like, well, there's bolt gen and all this other stuff for doing bolts, and I'm like, yeah, I don't do that. And we can actually, because of sub-object selection, I believe I can actually take this and just make this shorter. And I can. Yeah, it looks like there was some degree 3 stuff in there. Never mind. All right, so that's basically how you would do the bolt, and then obviously we would do this the right size. So I'm going to just cheat and scale this for now. But obviously you wouldn't do this if you were doing an actual design, because you wouldn't want to mess up the pitch and everything on this. But that is exactly how I model. Anytime I need fasteners in a model, that's exactly how I do it. Because I used to try and model all that stuff, and there's all these tutorials for how to model threads, and there's actually an old plugin called Bolt Gen that was really cool. But it's completely unnecessary now because you can just use this McMaster card trick. So I encourage you to do so. So let's fake one in here for the rendering because we're running out of time. And I'm going to just snap this to the center. I'm going to snap this to the center. Oop, who's there? Had it. There it is. And let's pull it out so you can see it a little farther. And remove that. And hour and 25 minutes with a little bit of blabbing. And we have a cool little skateboard idea. So let's do some cleanup. I'm gonna delete my curves. I usually just put them on a layer, but I'm gonna delete them for now. I'm gonna hide my image. Let's go to render view and take a peek what we got. Let's throw material on it so we can see what it looks like. I'm just gonna throw some gray primer on it for now. There you go. It's really dark. And then we have something that we could print, something that we could throw on a shelf, something that we could do some renderings or an animation or anything like that on, and go from there. I'll come back and watch me wreck some more stuff. All right. Thanks, everybody. I'm Kyle Houchins. This is Getting Started Rhino for Mac, version 6. We'll see you next time. Go make great stuff. Thanks. Bye.